When the conservative pundit, Marcus Thorne, stormed into the Union Hall and openly mocked Leo Garza as a radical thug while insulting his supporters, the crowd was stunned, but what came next galvanized the entire room. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani delivered a response that completely flipped the moment, leaving Thorne speechless and his credibility in jeopardy. This fiery clash is one you can't miss. The Union Hall in Astoria, Queens, was thick with grief, filled with quiet whispers and bowed heads. Families sat side by side, still mourning the sudden loss of Leo Garza, the fiery union organizer who had died just days earlier during a tense picket line confrontation. The wound was fresh, the pain unbearable, and many had come simply to mourn. Then the main door swung open. In strode Marcus Thorne, a familiar face from cable news politics. His steps echoed against the wooden floor as he made his way toward the open microphone. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Gasps rippled across the rows of folding chairs. Some lowered their eyes, others clenched their fists, not sure what he would say in this space of mourning. When he finally reached the podium, Thorne didn't offer a word of condolence. Instead, he raised his chin and smirked, his words slicing through the heavy air. "On Leo Garza," he began, "I do believe those of you interested in rewriting this hateful man's history are full of—" The audience froze. Some mouths dropped open. Parents pulled their children closer. A right-wing pundit had just walked into a memorial for a beloved organizer and mocked a man who had died only days ago. Something in the room cracked. The moment those words left Thorne's mouth, the hall transformed into a storm of disbelief. Elderly women wiped away tears, clutching photos of their union cards. Men shook their heads, furious that anyone, especially a media personality, could speak such venom in a place meant for solidarity. But it wasn't just the insult to Leo Garza. It was the vulgarity. The way Thorne sneered the phrase, "full of shit," as if mocking not just Garza but everyone who had fought alongside him. Whispers turned into heated murmurs. Some in the crowd rose from their seats, unable to contain their anger. One grieving organizer whose own son had been mentored by Garza whispered through tears, "How dare he? In our house, no less." The union president looked pale, gripping the sides of his chair. He had invited leaders to bring words of unity, not hatred. Cameras, brought by Thorne's own crew, caught the moment. Within minutes, his speech began spreading like wildfire on X. Clips of him insulting Garza's supporters were reposted thousands of times, and yet a small group of agitators Thorne had brought with him stood and clapped. A loud section gave him a standing ovation, fueling his smirk even more. But not everyone was cheering, and two people watching from the front knew this was the breaking point. In the front row, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Zohran Mamdani sat quietly with Leo's family. They had come not for politics, but for mourning. Leo Garza was not only a fellow socialist, he was a loyal friend, a fighter for the working class, and a man who had stood with them in their hardest moments. Their eyes scanned the crowd. They saw heartbreak, confusion, and anger boiling beneath the surface. Mothers sobbing, veteran union members shaking their heads, young people who once looked to Garza for guidance now staring in silence. They had heard Thorne's words, every single one. They had seen his mockery, his arrogance, his attempt to spit on the memory of a man who could no longer defend himself. And deep down, they both felt something stronger than rage. They felt duty. For years, they had endured insults from the media, from politicians, from enemies on the right. But this was different. This was an attack on solidarity, on community, on the very soul of a grieving movement. Slowly, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez rose to her feet. The room, still buzzing with unease, began to quiet as eyes turned toward her. The moment everyone had been waiting for had arrived. As AOC stood from the front row, the hall fell into a heavy silence. The clapping for Thorne stopped mid-beat. His smirk froze when he noticed her rising. It was as if the air had been pulled out of the room. For a moment, no one spoke. All eyes locked on the woman who carried the weight of the movement on her shoulders. Some whispered her name almost in prayer. "It's AOC." She didn't rush. She placed one hand on the shoulder of Leo's wife, steadying herself, not because of weakness, but because of the emotion pounding in her chest. She knew Leo's parents were there. She knew his comrades were scattered throughout the audience, and she knew that the pain was still raw. The crowd shifted, torn between hope and fear. What would she say? Would she explode in anger, or would she mourn with them? Cameras and phones tilted forward, ready to capture every second. Even Marcus Thorne, once smug, now stood stiffly, his hands tightening against the podium. AOC took one step forward, then another as Mamdani stood to join her. The silence deepened. Something unforgettable was about to happen. AOC paused, her gaze fixed on the photo of Leo Garza that had been placed near the podium. It showed Leo smiling, full of life, a bullhorn in his hand at a rally. For a brief moment, her face softened. Leo wasn't just a political ally, he was family in spirit. At 31, he had inspired thousands of workers, giving them courage to speak when the world told them to stay silent. His death had ripped a hole in the movement, a hole no words could easily fill. A murmur rose in the crowd as people began to cry again. Some wiped tears on their sleeves, others clutched the hands of their fellow union members, whispering that Leo had stood for truth, for justice, for the people. AOC finally spoke, but her voice wasn't fiery, it was low and steady. Leo was not perfect, she said, her words echoing in the stillness. None of us are, but he was faithful, he was loyal, he loved his community. People nodded, sniffled, clung to one another. The pain was real. The betrayal they had just witnessed from Thorne cut deeper because of that truth, and AOC knew it was time to strike. Marcus Thorne shifted nervously at the podium, eyes darting toward her. Only minutes earlier, he had basked in cheers. Now the room's energy had flipped completely. Every word from AOC carried a weight he couldn't match. He crossed his arms, trying to appear unbothered, but his lips trembled slightly. His mind replayed what he had said. Hateful man, full of words he thought would earn him applause. But now those same words burned his reputation like fire. AOC took a deep breath, Zohran Mamdani now standing beside her in silent support. She raised her hand, pointing slightly toward the podium where Thorne stood. The entire room leaned forward, desperate to hear. Her voice grew firmer. A cable news grifter standing in a union hall, mocking a man who was murdered and calling his community garbage. AOC paused, shaking her head. That should tell you exactly where we are as a society. Gasps echoed across the room. Thorne's eyes widened. The cameras, his own and those from phones in the crowd, caught his every twitch, every blink. He was losing ground fast. And they weren't done. They were only getting started. The battle lines had been drawn. Zohran Mamdani stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with AOC. His voice, now carrying across every corner of the hall, was filled with a quiet fire. Leo Garza, he said, wasn't just a man. He was a comrade. He was a son of queens. He was a fighter who loved his community even when powerful people mocked him. The crowd erupted with soft, then growing applause. But Thorne's face tightened. They weren't yelling. They didn't need to. Their calm tone was sharper than a shout. Then AOC shifted her eyes toward him, her words cutting like glass. And yet someone walks in here, into a hall built by workers, to spit on his name. A millionaire pundit from a TV studio using profanity against the dead. And he expects us to clap? The crowd gasped, some leaning forward as if they had just been hit in the chest. Thorne's lips parted, but no words came out. He had expected them to attack with unfocused rage, but instead, they were exposing him in front of everyone with undeniable truth. Every camera stayed fixed on them. Every phone streamed live. The nation was already watching, and this was only the beginning. Mamdani lowered his tone, but the weight of his words pressed down like stone. Marcus Thorne, he continued, comes from the world of cable news. Let me tell you about that world. A land with no connection to the real lives of working people, with manufactured outrage, corporate greed, and cynical ratings games running wild. 70% of their funding comes from the very billionaires who crush unions. The audience murmured. Some nodded. They knew the headlines. They had seen the ads on his show, but hearing it in this moment made it sting harder. Zohran went on. That world ranks among the most corrupt ecosystems on Earth. Backroom deals, disinformation, decades of chaos designed to divide us. And yet, He has the nerve to stand here in our community, mocking us, mocking our dead, telling us how to live. Thorne's eyes flicked from side to side. The smug grin he carried minutes earlier had disappeared. Sweat glistened at his temples. Mamdani pointed toward the photo of Leo again. This man gave his life fighting for a living wage in America, and Thorne thinks he can stand on his grave and lecture us? I don't think so. The crowd erupted with cheers. Tears flowed. Thorne's silence grew louder by the second. The camera zoomed in on him. His hands fidgeted at the podium, his papers rattling. The once confident pundit looked rattled, every breath heavier than the last. AOC leaned forward slightly, her voice rising for the first time. "And let's not forget," she said, pausing for effect. "Wasn't he the one whose network took millions from the same corporation that refused to negotiate with Leah's union? That's who's lecturing us about morality." The hall gasped audibly. Some people clapped. Others shouted, "Tell it, AOC!" The energy shifted like a wave crashing through the room. Zohran raised his hand for silence, his face serious. "You don't get to come into our community, take our pain, twist our truth, and then spit on our solidarity, our people, and our dead. Not anymore." Thorne's jaw tightened. He tried to interrupt, but the noise drowned him out. His voice was gone, replaced by the roar of the crowd. AOC and Zohran weren't just defending Leo, they were defending every grieving family, every union member, every working person who felt mocked and silenced. And in that moment, the union hall belonged to them. The hall was no longer divided. The applause that had briefly lifted Thorne minutes earlier had completely shifted. Every clap now thundered for them, and mothers wiped their tears and nodded in agreement. Fathers raised their fists in solidarity, as if to say, "Finally, someone is speaking for us." AOC let the moment breathe, standing tall, her eyes sweeping across the faces of ordinary New Yorkers, faces full of pain and longing for justice. She pointed gently at the crowd. "You deserve leaders who defend you, not media figures who spit in your faces while standing in your union halls." The crowd shouted back, "Yes, that's right!" The union president himself, still shaken from Thorne's profanity, pressed his hand against his heart, tears welling in his eyes. Thorne shifted uncomfortably, his earlier boldness now fading under the weight of raw truth. He knew every second was being broadcast live. Every word they spoke was carving into his image, undoing years of carefully built power. The silence between their sentences was louder than any chant. Everyone knew this wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about respect, dignity, and the soul of the movement. And Thorne was losing. In the front row, Leo Garza's parents sat together, holding hands tightly. His mother's shoulders trembled as tears streamed down her cheeks. His father's jaw was locked, but his eyes glistened with pride and pain. AOC's gaze fell on them, softening for a moment. She pointed toward the grieving family and said, "That family right there gave this movement a son who dedicated his life to solidarity, truth, and freedom." She paused. And yet in this very hall, their boy was mocked. Can you imagine their pain? The room fell silent. People turned to look at the Garzas, their sorrow piercing through the crowd like a blade. Leo's mother lowered her head, whispering something only she and her family could hear. But Zohran's voice carried the weight for her. This is what happens when hate is dressed up as commentary. This is what happens when arrogance replaces compassion. The audience stood to their feet, clapping and shouting, "We love you, Leo." Their voices trembled with emotion, some breaking down in sobs. Thorne looked away. For the first time, he understood. He hadn't just insulted Leo Garza. He had insulted every broken heart in the room. The cheers filled the hall, but Zohran raised his hand again, demanding quiet. Slowly, the crowd hushed, waiting for what would come next. His voice deepened. "Marcus Thorne talks about America as if he owns it. But let me remind him, he comes from one of the most broken institutions on earth, corporate media. It's plagued with lies, corruption, and contempt for working people. And yet, he tells us how to run our city." Gasps filled the room. Thorne's face turned stiff. He blinked rapidly, but the cameras were unrelenting, capturing every flicker of discomfort. AOC's next words dropped like a hammer. All of this. And wasn't he the one who argued against raising the minimum wage while taking a seven-figure salary paid for by anti-worker billionaires? That's who's preaching to us? That's the example we're supposed to follow? The room exploded, half in cheers, half in shock. Some wept harder, overwhelmed by the boldness of their words. Others clasped their hands together, whispering their thanks that someone had finally said it aloud. Thorne tried to steady himself, but his silence screamed louder than any denial. And AOC and Mamdani, with the nation watching, weren't finished yet. The cameras caught every detail: Thorne's tight jaw, his trembling fingers raised on the wooden podium, the darting of his eyes as he searched for support in the crowd. But the support was gone. The same people who had stood and clapped for Thorne minutes earlier now looked down in shame or anger. Zohran Mamdani's voice cut through the pundit's silently. He thought this moment would make him a star. But let me tell you something, it only revealed his character. The crowd erupted in murmurs. People nodded, some folding their arms, others whispering, "He's right." Thorne tried to steady his breath, but the weight of the moment was crushing him. AOC raised her chin, her tone calm but piercing. "You don't insult a man who died fighting for others. You don't mock a grieving family. And you don't walk into a union hall and spit on the dignity of working people." The hall broke into applause. Some wept openly. Thorne looked frozen, his confidence unraveling before millions watching online. The room no longer belonged to him. It belonged to them. Zohran let the applause fade, then leaned closer to the microphone. His words slowed, deliberate. "Our community deserves the truth about Marcus Thorne." The crowd hushed instantly. Phones stayed raised high, broadcasting every syllable. Zohran continued. "He came here from a TV studio funded by the most corrupt corporations in the world. And what did he do? He brought that corruption with him." Gasps filled the hall. Thorne's shoulders stiffened. Accused of taking dark money from anti-worker billionaires. Accused of spreading disinformation to break strikes. Accused of pocketing money from the very corporate interests that Leo fought against. These aren't rumors. They're facts his network buries while they tell us he's a man of the people. The audience roared in anger. Some shouted, "Shame on you," while others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Thorne's lips trembled. He reached for his phone, but it slipped from his hand and clattered onto the podium. The sight of him fumbling under pressure only fueled the energy in the room. AOC stood tall, unshaken. Her presence, combined with Zohran's, filled every inch of the hall. "The working class has had enough," she declared, and the crowd knew she meant it. By now, the Union Hall was electric. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, some crying as AOC and Zohran spoke. Thorne's earlier insult felt like a distant echo, drowned by the roar of truth. Mamdani lowered his voice again, forcing the crowd to lean in. A corporate millionaire standing in a union hall, calling one of the most dedicated organizers among us hateful and getting applause for it. That should scare every single one of us. The words hit like thunder. The union president covered his face with his hands. Families nodded, tears streaking their cheeks. This wasn't politics anymore. It was a battle for dignity, for solidarity, for the soul of the movement. Thorne's eyes glistened, but not with confidence. His mask was slipping. The smirk was gone, the arrogance replaced by fear. AOC turned toward him, her final line of the moment ringing like a gavel. "You insulted the fallen, you mocked the community, and you exposed yourself. Your platform is revoked." The hall erupted in cheers so loud they shook the walls. Thorne stood frozen, speechless, his career hanging by a thread. And AOC and Zohran stood firm, their community's love fiercer than ever. Their final words, "Your platform is revoked," still rang in the air. The crowd roared in agreement, clapping and shouting until the walls seemed to tremble. People rose from their seats, some crying uncontrollably. "Leo, we love you," someone yelled. "AOC Zohran, thank you," another shouted through tears. The camera crews panned across the room, capturing mothers hugging their children, elderly workers nodding firmly, and young people holding up their phones to stream live. The moment had gone far beyond Queens. Millions online were watching in real time. Thorne stood frozen. He wanted to push back, to defend himself, but he couldn't. Not here, not now. Any word he spoke would only bury him deeper. AOC raised her hand again, and the crowd slowly quieted. Her voice was calm but sharp. This is not about politics. This is about respect. This is about solidarity. The people listened, tears streaming, hearts pounding, and Thorne felt smaller than ever. The camera zoomed in on Leo Garza's parents again. His mother clutched her husband's hand, shaking with grief. His father's shoulders were stiff, but his eyes glowed with gratitude for the representatives standing in their defense. Zohran looked at them and spoke gently. Your son was mocked here today, but let me promise you this. His legacy will never be erased. Not by hate, not by lies, not by those who seek to silence the truth. His words broke the crowd. People sobbed openly. A young man in the back wearing a union pin bowed his head and whispered, "Thank you, Leo." Even the union president wiped his eyes, the meeting agenda shaking in his hands. The hall felt like it had transformed into something more than a place for meetings. It was now the heartbeat of a movement, crying out for justice. Thorne, still at the podium, shifted his weight. His silence felt deafening, his smirk long gone, and the cameras caught every second of his unraveling. Then it happened. The moment that would replay across every news channel, every phone, every platform. AOC leaned into the microphone. Her eyes locked on Thorne. Her voice was steady, sharp, and unforgettable. His entire network couldn't build what Leo built in one neighborhood. And yet, he thinks he can tear down our country. What a fraud. The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, and thunderous applause filled the air. Some people leaped to their feet, waving their hands in the air. Others fell back into their chairs, sobbing. The sentence cut through every layer of the night, searing itself into memory. Thorne froze, his mouth slightly open, his face pale. For once, he had no words. The crowd roared with chants of solidarity, solidarity, as AOC and Mamdani stood firmly, letting the echo of their lines settle into history. That single sentence didn't just silence Thorne. It rattled the very foundation of his career, and the world was watching. The hall shook as chants of "Leo, Leo, Leo" thundered from the crowd. The sound rolled like waves, powerful enough to drown out any thought of resistance. Others simply stood, hands pressed to their hearts, tears streaming down their faces. Thorne stood stiffly at the podium, his face pale. The applause that once cheered his venom was gone. Now every sound, every chant, every tear belonged to the people. Zohran raised his hand and slowly the noise softened. His eyes scanned the room, settling on the ordinary people who had come to grieve. "This is not about us," he said firmly. "This is about you. This is about Leo. This is about truth." The words cut through the emotion like a blade. People nodded, some weeping harder. A veteran organizer saluted, his shoulders shaking. Thorne tried to shift his papers again, but his hands trembled. He had never been more exposed. They weren't just speaking to the Union Hall, they were speaking to the nation. Even as the crowd listened with rapt attention, the moment was already spreading. Phones streamed the clash live, clips blasted across X, TikTok, and YouTube. Within minutes, hashtags like #StandWithLabor, #LeosLegacy, and #AOC Zohran began trending worldwide. Families in apartments in the Bronx, college students in dorms in Brooklyn, taxi drivers listening on their radios. All were watching as their representatives defended dignity and solidarity in real time. Back inside the Union Hall, Zohran's words grew sharper. "Leo was taken from us during a struggle, but Marcus Thorne thought he could stand here, insult his memory, and walk away without consequence. Not in our city." The crowd erupted in cheers again, the sound echoing beyond the hall's brick walls into the streets of Queens outside. Thorne's breathing quickened. He glanced nervously at the cameras, aware that millions were watching him unravel live. His silence screamed louder than anything he could have said. The viral moment was set in stone, and AOC and Mamdani knew exactly how to seal it. AOC stepped closer to the podium, her voice lowering but growing heavier. "A corporate millionaire in a union hall, mocking a worker who died fighting for justice and getting applause. This should wake us up as a nation." The crowd gasped, then cried out, "That's right!" Some stood to their feet, fists raised in the air, tears streaking their cheeks. It was no longer just a speech. It felt like a rallying cry, a cleansing of the room from Thorne's venom. AOC placed a hand on a union banner near the podium and spoke with conviction. This movement was built on solidarity, sacrifice, and freedom from exploitation, and we will not let corruption, lies, or hate tear it apart. Not now, not ever. The audience erupted once more, their voices trembling with emotion. People hugged each other, some raising their clasped hands in a sign of unity. Thorne lowered his gaze, unable to meet the eyes of the grieving families. He looked small, cornered, and defeated. AOC and Mamdani, on the other hand, looked unshakable, their presence larger than life, their words carrying the force of history. The battle was no longer just about Leo, it was about the future of the labor movement, and the crowd knew who they stood with. The chants finally slowed, but the energy in the room remained electrified. Thorne gripped the podium with both hands, his knuckles white. He opened his mouth once, twice, but no words came out. The camera zoomed in, capturing every flicker of panic on his face. Across the nation, viewers watched a pundit, once bold and defiant, stripped silent in front of grieving families and two unshaken representatives. Mamdani let the silence hang for a moment before breaking it. "He can't answer you," he said, pointing toward Thorne, "because the truth always silences a grift." The crowd roared, clapping and shouting through tears. A mother in the third row whispered to her daughter, "This is history. Remember this day." Thorne shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the cameras and the furious faces staring back at him. For the first time, he looked small, powerless against the force of the truth that was now pouring out. And they weren't finished. AOC stepped closer to the podium, her voice low but thunderous in weight. "Marcus Thorne came here as a vulture. This city gave him a platform, gave him an audience, gave him a voice. And how did he repay it? By attacking our unions, by lying, by committing character assassination." Gasps filled the hall. Phones lit up as people recorded every word. She went further. He took money from union-busting corporations. He funneled that money into attack ads. He stood with Wall Street predators instead of with you, the good people of this city. Thorne swallowed hard, his lips trembling. The once proud pundit looked cornered, helpless under the weight of truth. Mamdani raised his finger toward the ceiling. "This city has been generous, but this city will not be mocked, and our movement will not be defrauded by people who spit on its blessings." The crowd jumped to their feet. Tears streamed down cheeks, not only from anger, but from a raw sense of betrayal that a media figure had turned against them. Thorne stood frozen, unable to deny it, unable to walk away. By now, the atmosphere in the hall was overwhelming. Some cried quietly into their hands. Others clutched their union cards, whispering their support. A retired longshoreman leaned on his cane, tears rolling down his face as he whispered, "This is the movement I fought for." AOC's tone softened, almost sisterly. A millionaire standing in a union hall, mocking a dedicated fighter who was just killed, calling him hateful, and getting applause. That should be an eye-opener for every one of us. The hall grew still, every word pressed deep into hearts already breaking from grief. Leo's picture on the stage seemed to glow under the dim lights. His mother wept harder, leaning into her husband's chest. Zohran raised his hand toward the grieving family. "Leo Garza will be remembered as a fighter, and no insult, no slander, no hatred will erase his name." The crowd erupted, shouts of solidarity filling the air. People hugged one another, sobbing openly. Thorne bowed his head, his silence now louder than any speech, and the nation knew it was over for him. AOC turned back toward Thorne, her voice sharp but steady. "You came here with promises of truth, but all you brought was division, and corruption. That's the real truth." The crowd gasped and then fell utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of cameras recording history. She paused, then leaned in. "And now the working class has had enough." It was the line that sealed the room. Thorne's face drained of color, his lips trembling. He tried to adjust the microphone, but his hands shook. The silence from him was louder than any defense he could have offered. Families in the hall looked at each other with tears in their eyes. One elderly woman whispered, "Finally, someone said it." They didn't gloat, They didn't smile. They stood tall, the weight of truth carried in their calm expressions. The people erupted again, chants of Leo, 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 echoing like thunder. Thorne's downfall was no longer a matter of debate. It was unfolding live. The focus shifted again to Leo Garza's picture. The young activist's smiling face looked down on the crowd like a reminder of what had been lost. Zohran pointed toward it and spoke with deep emotion. This young man was called Hateful, but let me tell you, he loved his community. He loved justice, and he gave everything for the truth. He deserves honor, not mockery. The crowd broke down. Mothers hugged their children. Workers saluted with raised fists. Young people raised their phones, recording through tears. Leo's parents wept openly, but this time their tears weren't only of grief. They carried pride. Pride that their son's legacy was being defended before the whole world. AOC's voice softened even more. And to those who insult his memory, you will never win. Because solidarity is stronger than hate, and love for community is stronger than lies. The words hit the crowd like a wave. People sobbed louder, some embracing in the aisles, hands clasped together. The Union Hall had become more than a building. It had become a movement's heart, beating in unison. When they finished speaking, the entire hall erupted into a standing ovation unlike anything seen before. The sound shook the rafters. Some clapped, some wept uncontrollably. Others raised their fists to the sky in solidarity. The chants were deafening. Solidarity! 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 Thorne stood cornered, his silence now a scar. The cameras caught it all. The smirk he once wore was replaced with fear and humiliation. He had walked in thinking he would dominate the moment. Instead, he had been dismantled in front of millions. Zohran raised his hand once more for calm, his expression solemn. This is not about politics, he repeated. This is about protecting the soul of our movement, and I promise you, we will never stop fighting for you. The crowd exploded again, tears streaming down their faces as the chant shifted. Leo, 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 AOC turned toward Leo's grieving family, nodding with respect. And at that moment, the nation saw clearly these were not just politicians. They were defenders of solidarity, community, and truth. The camera zoomed in one last time on Thorne. His hand shook, his phone lay forgotten on the podium. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked, no words escaping. The man who had stormed into the hall with confidence and arrogance was now silent, defeated not by shouting, but by truth. The audience could see it. The world could see it. Millions online replayed the moment over and over, posting clips with captions like "Thorne humiliated" and "AOC and Zohran dismantle corporate pundit." They didn't even look at him now. AOC turned back to the grieving family in the front pew. Leo's memory will not be mocked, she said, not by anyone. Leo's mother wept into her husband's chest, whispering through sobs, "Thank you, thank you." The crowd rose to their feet once again. Chants of "Leo, Leo" shook the Union Hall walls. Thorne lowered his head, his career hanging in shreds before the eyes of the nation. As the chants echoed, Mamdani lifted his hand for quiet one final time. His tone softened, steady, and filled with emotion. We are not just members of different locals in this moment. We are workers, united by solidarity, by truth, and by love for our community. The words brought another wave of tears. Strangers hugged each other in the aisles. Veteran organizers saluted with raised fists. Young people streamed the moment live, whispering, "This is history." AOC pointed once more to the stage where Leo's picture rested. This young man gave his life for the truth. Let his memory guide us forward, and let no one ever take away the honor he deserves. The crowd erupted with applause so loud it rattled the windows. Some cried openly, others bowed their heads in reflection. It was no longer just a political clash. It was a spiritual awakening for the movement. And AOC and Mamdani, standing tall at the front, had brought their community to its knees in tears and renewed strength. The hall felt transformed, like it had witnessed something greater than politics. Thorne's silence lingered in the background, but all eyes were on them. They stood strong, their final words searing into history. AOC spoke first. "Our community will not be mocked." Zohran continued. "Our solidarity will not be mocked." AOC finished. Our people will not be mocked. Together, we will build a future for the many, not the few. The crowd erupted for the last time. Families embraced, veterans saluted, mothers held their children close. Tears streamed down faces as chants of "the people united" rose higher and higher. The cameras captured it all, sending the moment across the world. Millions felt the emotion. Millions felt the pride. Millions felt the tears. And as the memorial ended, one truth was undeniable. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Zohran Mamdani had defended the soul of the movement. If this powerful moment touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Please like this video, drop a comment about what part gave you the most hope, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these powerful stories. And for those who want to go even deeper, join our membership today to unlock exclusive features, behind-the-scenes stories, and special community access. Together, we honor truth. Together, we fight corruption. Together, we keep the movement strong.